The air tasted like grit and exhausted sweat, a perpetual flavor of the sprawling desert training complex camp. Shadowfall was its unofficial name, known only to the elite units who suffered its threats' relentless heat and brutal schedules. Lieutenant Anya Petrova stood near the edge of the firing range, a place she should have dominated, but where she felt like a misplaced exhibit. Her role as a civilian consultant was a thinly veiled cover, a political necessity to integrate advanced Navy special warfare methods into the rigid Army structure. It was a compromise nobody liked, especially not the Army Rangers. She wore a standard-issue uniform, crisp and clean, almost insultingly so against the backdrop of their perpetual grime. Her movements were economical, precise. She conserved energy in a way that screamed expertise, not daintiness, but to the Rangers, it simply screamed weakness. Her small frame, a deceptive package of muscle and sinew, only fueled their patronizing contempt. The days exercise involved dynamic movement drills under simulated fire conditions, a chaotic ballet of explosions, blank rounds, and shouted orders. The lead ranger, Captain Briggs, a man built like a granite slab, with eyes too close together, watched Anya. With undisguised distaste, he believed in brute force, invisible strain, in the kind of loud masculinity that left no room for subtlety or for women in command positions. He saw Anya's stillness, her silent observation, as an insult to his units. Hard work, a judgment from someone who had clearly never bled for a mission. He gathered his senior sergeants, a circle of nodding agreement, and whispered confidences, their eyes flicking toward the quiet, lieutenant-like hunters, sizing up easy prey. Briggs finally strode over his boots, kicking up dust with theatrical aggression. He stopped a few feet from Anya, radiating territorial dominance. She met his gaze evenly, her expression unreadable. He forced a smile, a nasty curve of the lip that never reached his eyes. He spoke loudly, loud enough for 50 nearby soldiers to hear his voice, carrying the sneering undertone of a schoolyard bully. He addressed her with mock deference, calling her ma'am, a title that felt like a slap. He questioned her credentials, her experience, her right to be there. He specifically pointed out her uniform, her perfectly tied boots, her lack of visible mud or strain, saying that she looked like she was ready for a tea party, not a war zone. He said she needed to take a shower before she contaminated his real soldiers. He repeated the phrase, "take a shower." They mocked the words, bouncing around the training area, drawing the attention of every sweating soldier who instantly understood the implicit order. A social execution. Anya did not react. She simply continued to look at him, her stillness growing colder, more intense. Her silence infuriated Briggs more than any verbal rebuttal. He needed a physical demonstration of her irrelevance. He decided on an impromptu lesson, a show of force designed to humiliate her thoroughly and permanently remove her political protection. He barked out an order to two of his largest sergeants, Miller and Hayes, two men whose entire identity was wrapped up in their physical bulk and obedience to Briggs. He commanded them to demonstrate the improvised interrogation technique. He mentioned a crude form of water stress designed to break resistance, but used here purely for degradation. Miller and Hayes moved instantly, like well-trained dogs. They approached Anya from either side, their huge hands grabbing her arms. She did not struggle, a fact Briggs interpreted as fear or compliance, but which was, in reality, a deep-seated professional economy of movement she was assessing, not fighting. A human computer calculating trajectory and resistance. The rough grip on her arms was unnecessary. They could have simply led her, but they enjoyed the compliance. Her small size seemed to grant them. They dragged her not gently across the uneven ground toward the infamous obstacle course, a section of the camp specifically designed for maximum misery. Obstacle course featured the mud pit, a long, deep trench filled with brown water, slick clay, and unidentifiable debris. It was cold, foul-smelling, and designed to cling to every inch of a soldier, making them miserable and heavy. The sight of the pit brought renewed laughter from the assembled Rangers, a cruel, ugly sound that was designed to break her spirit. Miller and Hayes hauled her to The very edge of the pit, their faces flushed with the adrenaline of sanctioned cruelty, Briggs stood nearby. Arms crossed, a triumphant sneer fixed on his face. He gave a sharp nod, the silent command for the final act of humiliation. The two sergeants lifted her, their strength overwhelming her stillness, and with a grunt of effort, they swung her out and tossed her hard into the center of the deep brown mire. The impact was violent, a shockwave of cold mud and water that knocked the air completely from her lungs. For a brief moment, she was fully submerged, the sickening taste of earth and decay filling her mouth. She slowly pushed herself up through the viscous material, the mud clinging to her hair, her eyelashes, her lips. Her formerly pristine uniform was now a sodden, dark brown rag. The cold seeped into her bones, a chilling reminder of the raw, physical reality of the situation. She pulled herself to her knees, the thick grime streaming down her face like grotesque tears. She paused, her chest heaving not from struggle, but from the effort of regaining control over her breathing. Briggs stood over her, his shadow long and contemptuous blocking the weak afternoon sun. He started speaking again, his voice dripping with condescension, saying something about this being a lesson in humility, about civilians playing dress-up, about how maybe now she would understand the real meaning of hard work and sacrifice. His men guffawed again, the sound loud and obnoxious, their victory complete. But as Anya slowly rose to her feet, a process that took deliberate, measured seconds, the mud clinging to her like a second skin, the atmosphere shifted, the laughter began to die, not suddenly, but fading away like a faulty radio signal. Her eyes met Briggs's. They were no longer the eyes of a passive consultant or a humiliated victim. They held a profound, terrifying calm, a silence that was louder than all the mockery that had preceded it. It was not anger, it was not defeat, it was the look of a predator who had just finished calculating the exact moment to strike. The air was thick with the change. Everyone felt it. The joke was over. It was no longer a game. Anya wiped a strip of mud from her left cheekbone, a deliberate, slow gesture that drew everyone's attention. Her breathing steady, deep, rhythmic inhales and exhales, a telltale sign of trained physical control. The cold, foul mud weighed her down, but her posture remained rigid, perfectly centered. Briggs felt a sharp, unwelcome prickle of unease. His bully's confidence wavering, he stepped forward, intending to deliver a final verbal blow, or perhaps shove her back down, a reflex of his need to dominate. He reached out his hand, aiming for her shoulder. Anya simply shifted her weight, a move so subtle, so swift, it registered as a blur of motion, despite the mud's resistance. His outstretched hand met only empty air. She leveraged her core, snapping her elbow back, and in a millisecond, caught Briggs precisely on the solar plexus. It was not a grand haymaker, but a short, sharp surgical blow that found the exact nerve center. Designed to incapacitate, the force was concentrated, explosive. The captain gasped, a strangled, wheezing sound, his eyes bulging with pain and absolute shock. He staggered backward, clutching his chest, disbelief, fighting with the raw agony that stole his breath. The laughter that had begun to rise from the watching rangers instantly ceased, silence descending like a guillotine. Anaya did not follow up on Briggs. He was irrelevant now. Her focus snapped to Miller, one of the sergeants who had thrown her. She moved like a phantom, the mud-caked uniform merely a disguise for the violent grace beneath. She closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, her hands snaked out, grabbing the sergeant's rifle with impossible speed before Miller could register the threat, much less react. Her other hand executed a quick twisting maneuver, a joint lock on his wrist that specialized operators call the snake twist. The pain was instantaneous, and searing. Miller screamed a high-pitched sound of agony unbecoming his bulk as he dropped his rifle, his eyes wide with incomprehension. She caught the rifle before it hit the ground, her grip firm and practiced. She pivoted toward Hayes, the other sergeant, who was frozen. Mid-gasp, she slammed the butt of the rifle into the dusty earth, precisely 6 inches from Hayes's boot. A silent explosion of dirt marked the warning. The sheer implication of her control, the proximity, and the cold, deadly accuracy of the gesture shattered Hayes's composure. He dropped to his knees instantly, hands raised in a universal gesture of surrender. Anja stood over the stunned captain, who was still bent over, gasping for air, trying to recover his breath and his dignity. Her body was coiled ready, the embodiment of controlled violence. The thick mud that covered her was suddenly not a mark of humiliation but war paint. She lowered the retrieved rifle, slightly resting the barrel near Briggs's ear. She spoke, her voice low, gravelly, a controlled weapon that carried authority far beyond her physical size. Her words were not simple threats, but technical commands. She cited the specific protocol number for immediate threat. Neutralization Protocol 37 Delta. She referenced a classified counterinsurgency technique known only to operators, the double-tap maneuver. She then uttered a specific call sign, Sierra Foxtrot 9 Echo. A legend whispered in high-level briefs for missions that never officially existed. She concluded by using a name for her own unit, a name that was synonymous with the most secretive, highest-tier combat unit.